What's going on, world? It's Ace Connors again at 93.7, the People Station. Today we have one of the best state representatives right now, Mr. Russel. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, Ace. How about you?
Good.
Appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. I feel like even before we get into the question, I feel like a lot of people probably admire your accent. Do you get that a lot?
Yes, I get it a lot. You know, I think that's one of the unique things about South Carolina is wherever you go, there's like four different dialects, right? But yeah, I do get it a lot. But just an old country boy from right down the road in Calhoun County. So
okay.
Working with what the good Lord gave me. You know what I mean?
I understand that. So growing up in Calhoun County, how do you think that, I guess, shaped you into the person you are today?
Yeah, well, I mean, it played a lot into who I am, for sure. I mean, I've grown up on the farm my entire life, so just having that understanding of what rural South Carolina is all about, the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis, but also the benefits that we get to enjoy, certainly is what I take to Columbia. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to represent District 93, but I grew up going to different public schools in the area. My mom was a public school teacher, so I went to Bennett Middle School, which is now William J. Clark. Went to elementary school over in St. Matthews, and like we were talking about earlier, I went to Swansea High School, which is actually in Lexington. So, I get a broad sense of, what the district looks like and what it feels like. Certainly growing up here has helped me understand what the needs of the people actually are.
For sure. So let's just get right into it. So what's going on, I guess, in the state of South Carolina when it comes to private schools, taking athletes away, people going to private schools, just taking people around?
It's kind of like what we were talking about just a little while ago. When you're from rural South Carolina, typically that's where your smaller schools are located. As everyone, all of your listeners are going to know, our public schools are broken down into classifications, right? So you've got like 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, and then I think there's a 5A now exactly for our biggest public schools. And that's who they compete against for state championships. So, our smaller schools are going to be found out in the rural parts of South Carolina. Calhoun County High School is a 1A school. Swansea, I think, is bumped up now to a 3A. But you've got North, I think, is a 1A here in Orangeburg County. Branchville, I think, is still at a 1A level. So those are your smaller schools. Typically, they've always competed against those same size schools, right?
Sure.
Public schools have to field their teams within an attendance zone. So if you're going to play for Calhoun County or go to Calhoun County High School, you have to live in Calhoun County. Well, what we've seen over the course of the last few years are public charter schools and even some private schools that are competing in the South Carolina High School League. They've really got an unfair advantage from my perspective because they don't have to adhere to attendance zones. So, for instance, Gray, not picking on Gray Academy, Gray Collegiate, but at the end of the day, they get to pull from wherever they want to pull from. And then they go on and compete against the Branchvilles, the Calhoun Counties, and they pull the best athletes, and then they compete against them. Doesn't really seem fair to me.
We'll be right back at 93.7 The People Station.
Absolutely.
And we're back. So, sir, I guess to piggyback off of what you recently just said about athletes being taken away from the region they're from and the county and stuff, what do you say to, I guess, private schools and charter schools saying that they give a better education as well?
Yeah, well, again, it's got to be apples to apples, right? You have to make sure that when we're comparing different schools that we're requiring the same things out of our schools, and that when we're judging them by the same criteria. And I would simply argue that if you're able to go out, again, traditional public schools have to take everyone that comes to them, everyone. Whether that might be a student that has challenges, or it might be a student that would be considered gifted and talented. When you talk about public charter schools, they do have to take everyone that comes and applies, but they have a cap. And so then when that cap is reached, they get to say, we don't have any room for you. Whereas if I'm in Calhoun County, they got to figure out, if somebody moves in, they've got to figure out a classroom to put that kid in, and they've got to figure out a way to educate that kid. And that's why those classifications move up and down sometimes, because enrollment might go up from one year to the next. And so now I've got more students than I did next year, and so my classification goes from a 2A to a 3A. Whereas Gray or some of these other charter schools, they cap their attendance at a certain level, and then they don't have to take anyone else. Also, traditional public schools have to meet certain mandates that are put on them by the state of South Carolina. You've got to have X number of hours in the classroom. Some of our charter schools are able to get around that, and they use it as a means to attract students, because they say, you know, we only going to go to school for 4 hours a day, and then in the afternoons you get to do virtual, or you get to, you know, go in and do all of your practices. And so again, you know, all education should be focused primarily on educating the kid. Sports should be secondary. And what I feel like is going on, not only in South Carolina, but across the country, you're having some of these schools that are propping themselves up, promoting themselves as an athletic destination. I mean, we saw a lot of that with some of the academies in Florida, you know, that were absolutely powerhouses, and you know, you had the best athletes from across the country going to some of these academies because of their reputation with sports, and that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, it should be about education. And I'm scared that we're seeing some of our public charter schools now touting themselves as athletic destinations. Student athletes are going there, and then they're unfairly competing against our traditional schools. That's why you're seeing all of these state championships being won by just a small number of schools year in and year out. I know we're going to take a break, and we'll come right back.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll be right back. We're back again with State Representative Russel Ott. So, to piggyback off of I just want to say this. What do you think about choice schools? And I've seen a lot of counties and a lot of areas around the country being able to choose whatever public school you want to go to.
Yeah, we actually passed that this year in you know, the House of Representatives. So that's certainly coming next, which will, you know, that will help, right? So then we're going to have students move. That'll help athletically, right? To try to level the playing field, because you will have, I'm sure, students and athletes bouncing from one traditional public school district to the next. You know, I think there's pros and cons to answer your question. You know, I certainly believe in a parent having the ultimate say over where their sons or daughters ultimately go to school, and you know, there shouldn't be any limiting factors when it comes to that. But you know, at the end of the day, I just don't want to hamstring certain schools, especially those schools in the rural parts of South Carolina, and take, you know, the best students out of a particular school, and they transition or migrate into another area. Well, that school is going to have to continue to operate, and then, you know, what's going to be left there? I just don't want educational deserts to be created. You know, whenever you do something new, there's always going to be pros and cons that you aren't aware of, and
for sure,
that's just what I want to make sure. I'd love it. I'd love for there to be a day, you know, my dream, and it's probably a pipe dream, that we would need private schools. We wouldn't need public charter schools, because all of our public schools would be so good that it didn't matter where you went. You could go to a public school wherever you lived, and you knew that your kid was going to get a good education. And we don't have that right now, you know, and I get that, and we've got to do some things better. We've got to be more, we got to hold our schools accountable more. But I don't think just picking up and moving is always
for sure
the solution.
So I'll say, speaking of rural areas and stuff, I know I went to Scotts Branch 1A school.
Sure.
And I've seen a lot of times where, speaking of sports, that if people in all the areas would come together, and you know, we'll probably have a better football team, a better basketball team, a better track team. But it's crazy because I know Scotts Branch is one of the stepping stones for Briggs versus Elliott. And Summerton, South Carolina is 50% African American and around 45%, Caucasian. But the public school in Summerton, South Carolina is 98% black. And I feel like if everybody, came together, who knows, probably some big, some powerhouse. Even in Calhoun County, I think it's 57% black, 36% white, but the high school is 67% African American, and and 20 some around the area of white Caucasian. So why do you think that, I guess, people are kind of flying somewhere else to not go into school in their county as well?
Well, I mean, it started back during desegregation. You know what I mean? That's certainly, people can say what they want to say, but historically speaking, that is why private schools started, was in response to, desegregation and having everyone come together. Private schools popped up predominantly in the southern portion of South Carolina so that white students would have a place to go. That's why you don't really see them up in the upper part of the state. So, I hate it, but it's a reality. So we're going to have to deal with it, and at the end of the day, just try to make things as fair as we can. And we're going to take one more break and then come back and wrap this thing up, I think.
We'll be right back. We're back again with Ace Conyers and State Representative Russel. So, speaking of private schools and taking athletes away, so what do you propose? What do you think you should do?
Yeah.
We should do?
Well, we tried this year to do something innovative. Here's the problem, right? So all of our athletics are governed by the South Carolina High School League. They're the entity that takes a look at student population and then goes through the classification process. They're the entity that decides whether an athlete is going to be eligible or ineligible. They're the ones that, fines are going to be levied against a team for breaking the rules. They're the entity that makes all of those types of decisions. There is a law on the books, a proviso, to be more specific, that says the South Carolina High School League has to treat all of their members exactly the same. And that's a little known fact. We've got private schools that are competing in the South Carolina High School League against public schools because they chose to be a member there rather than be a member of SCISA. And SCISA is where traditionally your private schools compete against each other. So that means, when we say they have to be treated the same, it's all based off of population. And so if a charter school has 700 kids, then they have to be put into a classification with other 2A schools. And all I'm saying is that doesn't make sense. If you're going to be able to pull kids from all across the state, the best athletes from all across the state, then the high school league should have the opportunity to bump you up a classification so that the playing field is more level. So you might only have 700 kids going to your school, but you are top heavy on great athletes, so we're going to make you play at the 3A level or either maybe the 4A level based off of that sport. But they can't do that right now based off of the law, so we tried to change that this year. We got it passed in the House, and unfortunately the Senate did not go along with it. So, we're going to start over next year, and, I think we'll get to a point where all of our public charter schools are playing in a league all by themselves. Because public charter schools are going to continue to grow in this state, and then, they'll be competing against themselves, and it might not be an issue, but until then, we need to make some changes. And that was a common sense, solution to a problem that I think we should have enacted. We didn't, but hopefully we'll get around to it next year.
Okay. Well, I would like to say thank you for definitely coming. Thank you for telling your opinions and what's going on around the South Carolina State area.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you. Y'all are doing great things over here at the People's Station 93.7. So just appreciate the opportunity to swing by and have a little talk with you, and always look forward to coming back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for listening.
Appreciate you.